forward as part of your project group discussions. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Anna. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, congratulations to you all for being selected as Rhodes Australia Fellows. It's a really exciting opportunity for you all to contribute to the health and wellness of your industry. For the next 10, 20 minutes, I'm going to try and give you some information around the background of the state of wellness in infrastructure and why this needs addressing, the importance of leadership from yourselves on addressing this issue, also why the Rhodes Australia Fellowships are focusing on primary interventions. I'll give you a brief overview of our Victorian working group that's concerned with wellness in infrastructure, and just a little clarification on why we're focusing on white collar workers going forwards in this fellowship. So as a bit of a background, I got involved with the construction infrastructure industry after being invited to a regular meeting of some concerned staff from tier 1, tier 2 companies here in Victoria who were observing some anecdotal evidence of compromised mental health in their white collar infrastructure professionals, their friends, colleagues. They were also seeing a high degree of employee turnover, high rates of absenteeism, and they put this down to the increasing demands of individual jobs, demands on their companies, and just the sector in general. And this was manifesting as a reduction in work-life balance to pretty much everyone that they were working with. They saw the downstream effect of this reduced work-life balance as posing a risk to completion of projects on time and on budget, but they were mostly concerned about their ongoing observations of poor mental health, how that affected job performance, how much their colleagues enjoyed coming to work, and the appearance of their colleagues just being completely burnt out or being cooked, as I learned was a phrase that they like to label the people that were really struggling. So beyond having a chat about this, we felt as though we needed to document the size and the breadth of the problem. So we developed a survey amongst the group of us. Got some buy-in from 8 to 10 big infrastructure companies, and we distributed this survey back in May 2018. It was open for a few weeks, closed up at about middle of the year. We had 8 really strong participating companies. Over 1,000 people signed up to our website to try and complete the survey, and almost 700 of them completed. It's actually 683, which is the largest survey of its kind nationally in this industry. About 200 females completed the survey, almost 500 males. They reported high levels of job security. They felt really valued by their company and thought that the status of their job was appropriate for the work they were doing. So that was some positive news, but almost 60% of them reported just being completely dissatisfied with their work-life balance. More concerningly, their average levels of depression, anxiety and stress exceeded population norms by 40% for depression, 38% for anxiety and 37% for workplace stress. The respondents also reported 2.5 times higher mood disturbance than the normal population. And additionally, their level of physical health complaints, so things you go and see a doctor about, were 50% higher than the normal population. 85% of them reported suffering from moderate to high levels of stress. 46% met the criteria for being completely burnt out. This is a really disturbingly high statistic, given that I was surprised that in the oceanic region, the normal population has a rate of 28% of them are burnt out, which I thought was really high, but when you look at your colleagues in your industry, 46% of them met that same criteria for being burnt out. 64% of people reported working over 50 hours per week. This won't come as a surprise to any of you. And in contrast to the general population, where about 20% of people report being satisfied with their work-life balance, so time at work, time they get to spend with their family, time to sleep, 59% of the respondents in this survey reported being unsatisfied with their work-life balance, as a drastically higher number. So what do all these figures really indicate? To me, the infrastructure, construction, and professional staff are highly stressed. They're reporting significantly compromised mental and physical health, have unsatisfactory levels of work-life balance, and drastically high levels of burnout. We put this down to the increasing demands, long hours, time pressure, and expectations to work outside of normal hours that were requiring these employees to provide unsustainable efforts. And this was resulting in their mental and physical damage to themselves, to the workforce generally. So obviously, changes are necessary to protect the health and well-being of this workforce. So moving on to what is the importance of leadership from yourselves in addressing this issue? As I've mentioned, the research indicates that job stress and other work-related psychosocial hazards are emerging as leading contributors to the burden of occupational disease and injury. And work-related stress can also, does have negative impacts on your mental health. If you have a significant amount of workplace stress and have to take some leave, it accounts for about 24 days of work loss for every person affected by significant workplace stress, which is a very large amount of time that you have to take off and projects lose if you're suffering from high degrees of workplace stress. But as fellows, you're uniquely placed and supported in your industry to identify the drivers of reduced wellness and mental health as you're living it day to day. And therefore, you should be able to have an idea of what things could be changed that would benefit yourself, your workmates, and the industry as a whole. For example, after that survey, we ran a series of workshops to try and get to the core of what's actually causing, what are the drivers of the results and what initiatives could also be employed. So got a group of almost 100 people together over 2 days, and we discussed at the individual level, at the organisational level, and at the industry as a whole, what the people in your industry thought were the drivers. So I'll give you a bit of a run through of those. So at the individual level, some real common themes, issues that were identified were time, not having enough time, working long hours, resourcing, a lack of resources, a lack of on-the-job training, empowerment, not being able to do things when needed to, but also having some real individual intrinsic motivation, like really enjoying your job and pushing yourself to deliver on these complex jobs. And disappointingly, poor leadership was identified at the individual level as well. But it wasn't all negative. A lot of the groups saw some simple solutions, such as better work arrangements, being able to turn off at home, maybe companies offering better educational opportunities around mental health and well-being, better education on the job training, how to better complete the job on a day-to-day basis, and also being empowered to maintain your work-life balance. When you need to go home, see your family, take someone to the doctor or whatnot, having an understanding manager or company that empowers you to make those decisions yourself. At the organisational level, some of the issues that were identified were culturally driven. So the culture of working long hours, not taking breaks, no flexible hours, because it's what has always been done, so we might as well keep doing it. Really challenging projects with tight budgets, less staff than would be ideal, just general under-resourcing. Poor communication from at the organisational level. Struggling to identify some talent to do jobs well, not being able to get the right type of training so that people were able to cope with the day-to-day demands. But solutions-wise, some of the things that your colleagues came up with were increasing some rewards, recognition, support, resources so that they could get their jobs done easier and more effectively. Some improved flexibility around work hours, and also more accurate accounting of work hours, not just assuming that it's okay to work 12 hours but be paid IT blackout system, and maybe just some improved teamwork just across the organisation. But the best ideas from these focus groups that we found were primary prevention methods, meaning it's better to identify an issue, find a solution before it negatively impacts employees, because by then it's too late. As such, this is why the fellow program is focusing on primary prevention interventions. This can be done in a number of ways and through many methods, which were mostly industry or your sort of organisationally dependent. They can take the form of simple promotion of the mental health benefits of physical activity and good general health, fostering mental health and awareness through training, mental health well-being, encouraging transparent dialogue about such things, nurturing a positive workplace that is transparent and inclusive, developing partnerships and alliances between government, insurers, mental health professionals and other entities to improve communication, engagement and mental health recovery, or like what your projects are charged with doing, creating positive organisational design that directly influences employee motivation, performance and happiness. I also wanted to mention on the back of the survey results and focus groups, we've established a Victorian-based working group to monitor and share the impact of wellness initiatives at an industry level. It comprises 30 members from 8 construction companies. Their role is to generally research what is working in your industry and what isn't, and what programs, initiatives that we should be trying to roll out industry-wide. Once we're able to achieve this, we'll again be able to evaluate the outcomes of programs via a focus group or probably a number of focus groups or a survey. The focus group idea is probably something that you could utilise to evaluate the efficacy of your own project going forward. And lastly, why are we focusing on white collar in your industry? To be honest, before we did our survey, no one was focusing on it. And that was disturbing. And the results indicated that there was a serious problem, the mental health and wellness of these white collar professionals. Importantly, though, the survey was conducted, and equally importantly, it uncovered that white collar infrastructure professionals are highly engaged, motivated, felt really appreciated by their companies. They did, however, report compromised work-life balance, significant mental health challenges, and that they're working to the point of burnout. Unfortunately, this pattern of results is unlikely to be unique to the company sampled and the state of Victoria, which I guess is why we're here today to discuss this fellowship program and wellness in infrastructure. That's about all I really had to pass on to you. I'm open for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Luke. It's David Stewart-Watt. I think it's very topical as well during COVID-19, Luke, in terms of the issues we have. I had a young lady come back to our office the other day who lives by herself. And as she said, that being home by herself was actually, she started feeling deprived for human attention. And so we got her back into a project office. I think the other important thing for everybody on the call is that a lot of people in our industry just don't realise that we have got what is not a proud record of mental health and supporting our staff right throughout the industry. And for those that are not aware, that Roads Australia kicked off the road safety chapter 2 years ago, and half of the full-day workshop event was devoted to mental health and safety for our workforce. And I think we had nearly 300 people in the audience, Hannah, and it was a absolute wake-up, as you said, Luke, to remind us in our industry that we need to do more to support one another, to support our colleagues, and to support our staff, and in some cases to support our bosses. And as I said, I think your research demonstrates that we're out of step with society, out of step with other industries, and something that we absolutely need to focus on. Now, we've got quite a bit of time for questions, and remember that given your project topic has a big focus on some of the discussion that Luke has just had. It's a great opportunity for you to probe Luke and get some input, as well as clarify some of the work that he's done. We got a first question out there.
We've got one in the group chat. So 2 ways you can have questions, guys. Just a reminder, you can either put it in the group chat there. Thanks, Kate. I see you've put a couple in there, or you can unmute yourself and put your hand up, and you can also speak directly. So up to you. So David, I'm not sure if you can see that chat.
Yeah, Marley, what happens if you don't mind reading those 2 chat ones, because they come up on my screen and before I get to read them, they disappear.
No worries.
I'm happy to ask them directly if you want, if that's easier.
Go for it, Kate.
Yeah, good on you.
Hi, Luke. Nice to meet you. My name's Kate Borg. I'm on the Fellowship Council, so I'm not actually doing the project, but I was really interested in your discussion. I'm particularly interested in white-collar health and wellbeing as well, being a leader of a white-collar workforce myself. So just a couple of questions from me. You talked about some of your initiatives that you thought were good that we could start to implement. Have any of them been tested in a value for money type proposition? Have they been tested in that regard? A lot of our clients will be interested, and a lot of our company leaders will be interested in a value for money proposition.
Yeah, we haven't evaluated them personally on a value for money or efficacy basis for the amount of money you spend, but there was a PricewaterhouseCoopers report a couple of years ago that looked into the return on investment for mental health programs within white-collar workforce. And for every dollar that was spent, the value accrued from that was about $2.57. I can't remember the exact figure. So what that meant to me was that no matter what you're doing, if you're spending the money, it will return the value through greater mental health of your staff, and that will translate into a better bottom line for companies down the track. So, which is really encouraging. But on the basis of evaluating what works, particularly, there hasn't been much work done. There are a lot of frameworks out there, a lot of companies providing specific programs that pretty much go unevaluated. I'm sort of happy to report that on the basis of the survey and the focus groups, created a consortium with McConnell-Dowell, Decmill, and out at the Mordialloc Bypass, and another consulting company that works in this mental health space, and applied for some funding through the WorkSafe's WorkWell Fund, which is aimed at improving wellness across many industries, but at-risk sort of groups. And your industry, unfortunately, fits in that. We've luckily been funded in the last month or so about $1.2 million to put into place develop a framework around a prevention-focused framework around protecting the mental health and well-being of people in the construction industry, but also I'm involved mainly to evaluate it. So looking at the same measures that I've just spoken about before and after these programs go in, and to evaluate whether this actually made measurable changes to the mental health of the people within this study, and whether there is value for money in the types of programs that go in. And we're planning on releasing that framework through WorkSafe and through another working group that we have, so that it's available for the entire industry and other industries. So from an evaluation standpoint, this will be the sort of first time that's been done, and be freely available for everyone to look at, so that they will know what works and what doesn't, and institute things in their own companies on the basis of it.
I kind of think it's a good thing that it's still very fresh, so that our team and our Roads Australia trajectory can kind of be pioneering in a lot of respects, because we really understand what the problems are. So it's kind of refreshing. Sorry, David, I interrupted you there.
No, I was just going to say that, that it's a very good question. I think we've got a very good handle of the costs. And so Roads Australia has that information. So the costs are much easier to measure, but as you said, the benefits of the program are more difficult. And there's a big opportunity for our Roads Australia Fellows project. There's a few more questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much, Luke.
That's all right.
Marty, there's a few more on chat there.
One more coming through, one from Andrew Hamill. Do we have a range of initiatives or actions that relieve the symptoms of mental health issues or burnout for white collar workforce? And what's the cure?
That's a very challenging question. As I just mentioned, there are a range of initiatives out there and action, and equally many actions that would relieve the symptoms of mental health, stress, and that on individuals. So the real challenge with that is some of these initiatives, changes to your behaviour, work for some people, but they don't always work for everyone. So whilst sort of improved work-life balance might be good for some people, other people who turn off their email of the evening might struggle the next morning with having to catch up on what they've missed out on overnight. So the real challenge for knowing what initiatives, what actions are going to be more effective in the long run is that evaluation piece that I mentioned. But the simple things that we identified in the focus groups were like very broad brush, but like having better work arrangements, being able to turn off at home, also far more difficult these days with the COVID-19 situation. Also, like, it's great that we're talking about these things, but it's one thing for us to be able to talk about what does work and what might work. But I think it's important that we all get more education around mental health and wellbeing, so that we do know what it means to have mental ill health, other things that can improve your wellbeing, and how to identify that in your colleagues. So I'm not sure about a cure. I think there's a number of things that we can do, but employees, managers need to be empowered to be able to work with their employees to deliver what is going to be the most effective solutions for the greater amount of people.
Yeah, I tend to agree, Luke, and it is a range of solutions, isn't it? And something as simple as, are you okay? I mean, it's been demonstrated that it can make a difference with a lot of people. Yeah. Marley, next one.
Yeah, thanks so much for your question and answer, Luke. Matt Aldrich, I see you've got your hand up, so over to you. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks. Yeah, Luke, I just wanted to check, without obviously being a golden bullet on what's going to solve all these issues, do you think it's more an industry-based thing and the answer should be coming from government and be mandated across all businesses, or is it more that individual businesses should be looking to try and come up with solutions?
Yeah, great questions. It's certainly a bit of both. These businesses are like you're working for the government mostly, and there's tendering processes. It's a bit of a race to the bottom financially, whatnot, and you have to tick many boxes on the types of let's say like health and safety. What I'd like to see going forward is that government works with your industry, particular organisations, on changing this the tendering process, so that we have to include say mental health wellness audits as well. Like we've come a long way in the past decade looking after the physical health, the safety on sites, and I don't think it's as big a stretch to try and include wellness, mental health sort of initiatives and checkpoints within the tendering and running projects going forwards. It's something that I'm working towards at the moment with another steering committee, where we actually have some government members. We have Hannah from Roads Australia in this group, and some very big hitters from the industry who are trying to help us work with government to influence them into changing how work is distributed and conceptualised going forward. But in a shorter answer to your question, it definitely, the organisations need to push back, and whilst also making life for their employees and work life more palatable.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Right, Marley, with the next question.
Yeah, thanks for your question and answer, Luke. We've got a few coming through. So 2 that are very similar. One from Winnie in South Australia. Thanks, Winnie. Hi, Luke. How is the mental health issue in our industry comparing to other service industries, so e.g. bank and hospitality? And one similar straight afterwards from Philip. Your research compared our industry to the general community. Are you able to compare our industry with other industries and what are similarly competitive, and advise what they do to achieve a different or better outcome?
Yes, so in the they're all very good questions. The challenge with comparing industry to industry is that we're sort of, if another industry has conducted the same type of research, but they haven't used the same measures, it's very difficult to compare sort of apples with oranges. So within that initial survey report, there are some comparison groups, different industries that utilise the same type of survey measures, which did show that your industry was particularly stressed and burnt out in comparison to other industries that I thought would have had a worse psychological profile. So it is difficult to compare unless people from different industries have completed the same measures. The second part of that question was, I can't remember. Oh yeah, and so there are industries out there that you might think are more stressful, like say emergency services and whatnot, policing, like particularly at the moment, the medical community, who also work very similarly long hours to your industry. We have consulted broadly with these industries, so we've got some really good learnings from emergency services, particularly. Some companies have invited people from these industries to come and talk to their employees about how they cope with the stress of their job and see what types of learnings from them are transferable into their companies, because we all do have mental health, well-being. So anything that can help us deal with the day-to-day stress or things that are impacting our mental health, no matter what industry these examples come from, can certainly be beneficial.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. It was interesting. We had the emergency services presented at our Melbourne workshop, and as you suggest, there was a lot of crossover and a lot of lessons learned. And for those who are interested, those papers are available through Rhodes Australia. But there is a lot of crossover, and I agree we need to learn from as many other industries as possible. Marley, a few more?
Yeah, a few more coming through. Thanks, guys. Keep them coming. Next one from Hayley. Keen to understand a bit more about the redesign assumption that procurement models and timelines are fixed.
I am as well. I'm certainly no expert, in that field. I've spoken to people so all my experience with this procurement modelling, that comes from Victoria. So I've spoken to people at the Office of Projects Victoria who are in control of a lot of these procurement models. They're interested. I'm not sure if they're keen to integrate wellness checks into the procurement models going forwards. But as the sort of holder of the bag of money, this is something that they could certainly do. whether it will happen sooner rather than later or ever, I'm not too sure. But we are in constant communication with MTIA, Major Transport. I always forget, there's too many acronyms in this business. Feeding back what companies are saying about these processes and whether we can influence procurement. But at this point, we're still sort of getting the people together, the evidence together, so that we can show that these are the things that are driving the problem, and it is what needs to change so that the industry can go forwards, particularly with the many billions of dollars of infrastructure construction going on and in Victoria at the moment, or nationally at the moment.
Can I just add something there quickly in regards to that? And this is part of the reason we focused the project on this in terms of looking at changing procurement to better respond to industry capacity. It's something that's a discussion that we've had in other areas, obviously not just mental health, and those things are very slow to change and dependent on a lot of other factors. And in the wellness committee meetings in particular, one of the challenges has been that we can't always make change immediately, and this is something that needs addressing immediately. So I guess the redesign and how we focus the project on the redesign, assuming that procurement is fixed for now, is so that we can implement something that can actually make change now and can be used by our members immediately, rather than putting forward another lot of sort of recommendations to government to say, well, you know, mental health will be alleviated if you do X, Y, Z, because we don't see that as being able to make an impact as quickly as the outcomes of the project. So that's, I guess, a bit more explanation as to why we've focused on that.
I think it's a very good point, Hannah. And look, I think the other issue is that that something as simple as requiring a plan, a mental health plan, Luke, as through procurement rather than be specific, I think is probably the way to go. It was tried on the Pacific Highway, and the example was actually presented at a Roads Australia truck crew for their project. And ironically, and there was enough, you mentioned about a dozen of them in a team, led by a female foreman as well. And ironically, that was part of their plan to create a culture change on their project. And that led to others on the project sort of demanding, if you like, to get some of the benefits that these ladies had put in place for themselves. So by just requiring a plan through procurement can make a difference and get people to come up with their own initiatives. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Well, that's excellent that people would be self-selecting. Like we want to have a plan to look after ourselves and look after our colleagues. Like let us get involved. Like that's so encouraging. That like everyone should know about this.
Yep. Marley, there's a few more there.
Yeah, a few more questions coming through. Next one from Rebecca. Thanks, Beck. Has there been a focus group on how businesses view their actions towards mental health? At an individual level, actions will never cure the problem.
Not that I've conducted. So our focus group's focused on trying to get your colleagues to identify what are the drivers of the results that we found. So things that occur to them at the individual level, things about the way the organisations are set up, and things that the greater industry, how that impacts the individual. So we haven't examined yet how businesses view their actions towards mental health. In the couple of committees that we're on, I get a lot of feedback that the organisations already have mental health plans, EAPs, different initiatives that should indirectly or directly support the mental health of their employees, which is like all well and good. I think like that's terrific that they're trying to do these things. The real issue is when we did the survey, it appears that no matter what your company has been doing, is doing, you still have the result of really elevated levels of mental ill health, reduced well-being. So what is being done might be good, it might be keeping the levels somewhat down, but it's certainly not effective enough at the moment to get people to be operating at a normal level of stress and having an adequate work-life balance.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Luke. Next one coming through from Richard. Thanks, Richard. Is the PwC paper on ROI, sorry, hang on, what's coming up? Is the PwC paper on ROI of wellbeing spent in construction publicly available? The info would help to guide exploring of initiatives measured measurement of value outcomes.
Yeah, I had that same question myself when someone mentioned it. They said yes, and I found it somewhere online. I'll try and dig it up after this meeting and pass it on, maybe through Hannah, so they can distribute it out to the fellows.
That'd be great. We can do that. Next one from Scott Tapley. Policy often becomes ineffective when the culture of the organisation takes over. Did your research touch on the views of senior executives and their willingness to actually lead the change from the top?
Great question, Scott. The research didn't touch on the views of senior executives and their willingness to act, but what spoke volumes was the survey came about, as I mentioned, from just a regular meeting of concerned staff across different businesses. So your McConnell Dow's, BMD, Downer, Langer Raw, John Holland, CPB, those sort of companies, the guys that sort of project manage level. And so they got some senior leadership buy-in to be able to fund doing this, which was good. So maybe a little bit higher up in the hierarchy. But then once the results came out, I hosted the presentations and meeting here at Swinburne, and we had a couple of Victorian CEOs turn up, high-level general state managers turn up. So in a way, their appearance at that meeting to hear about the results and to also commit to work together over the following 18 months, because we're still all working together. We have a really powerful steering group together at the moment, probably says that they are this particular group and that their companies allow them to come to these meetings. Really shows that they are willing to try and lead the change from the top.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that answer, Luke. Next one down, Alan. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for your time, Luke. Did the survey focus on just construction organisations with the infrastructure industry, or were there other organisations such as design firms, infrastructure advisory firms, law firms supporting infrastructure projects also targeted? If so, how are these benchmarked against the cultural differences in the nature of these organisations?
Short answer, no. As I mentioned, the companies that were involved were like Downer, Langer Raw, John Holland, CPB, Lendlease, BMD, WBHO, sort of people that ranged in sort of job role from site engineer, project support services, project engineers, project directors. So generally more engineering based people. We did try and extend the survey out to the consultants, like larger consultant groups doing the same things. We had a lot more difficulty getting them all in one room and to work together. So that unfortunately didn't go anywhere. And we unfortunately were unable to sort of tap into law firms, advisory firms, so like different sections of these types of companies. I am in contact with a person who is, well, indirectly from a law firm and from one of the larger consulting companies, who's now doing a PhD on how procurement processes impact mental health and what is it called, organisational justice. So that's sort of moving a little bit further out in the types of people that she is going to look at. But unfortunately, we were quite limited in the types of people, which is good. Like we can comment solidly about these groups of people, but we can't really extrapolate that out to the other groups.
There's probably an opportunity for next year, Luke, because all of those companies, of course, are members of Roads Australia. So you do have the broad church within this organisation. Maybe that's the next step. Maybe it's a recommendation from the Fellows Projects.
Yeah, that would be a terrific idea.
Marley, how are we going?
Thank you. A few more to go. I know we've got 10 minutes left on the schedule, so a few more questions to go. Next one from Philip. Do you think that there is, where to find a solution that is situated to Australia? This could be compromised by globalisation and the pressure from foreign companies with different cultures. Actually, was this research also undertaken overseas, and where were the results different than Australia?
Oh, not a short answer, no. I've certainly heard anecdotal reports that there are distinct challenges working with the overseas companies coming here, so the increased globalization pressures from foreign companies. Certainly heard some very challenging phrases dealing with Victorian-based companies reporting back to their international colleagues, which really it surprised me, but it also gave me an idea of what another type of driver for these results. And this survey itself was undertaken just in Victoria, but I think you could generalise out to the rest of Australia. I've been in contact with people nationally, and they say probably very similar story here, but we don't have the numbers on that. There was, I think there was a meta-analysis, so people getting together different studies that have been done in construction industries internationally to see what the problems have been. So it felt like it was across Canada, the UK, a couple of other places in Europe, where there were elevated levels of stress and sort of elevated levels of psychological distress, as well as a general theme in the construction industry. But a number of these studies didn't differentiate between blue and white collar. So in one way, it's not overly valid to compare them and say, yeah, it's a pretty common theme internationally. But I think we're starting to get the picture that internationally there is an issue with this industry and the types of projects that are delivering everywhere.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Luke. One similar question below, but to Guy, that probably answered your question before about similar industries globally and engaging those. Another question from Andrew: is there an established link between mental health and physical well-being level of activeness, or is this more likely a personal trait?
A bit of both. Actually, there's a strong link between mental health and physical well-being. The more, I was going to say insightful, the more self-aware of you that have been stuck at home and haven't been able to get out, we'll probably have noticed a bit of an alteration in your mood, how you've been feeling day to day, on top of just that general cabin fever. That'll give you a little bit of an insight into the link between mental health and physical well-being. In our survey, for example, I mentioned that the increased mental health issues was also accompanied by increase in physical health. So you can imagine going to work day to day and being under stress, probably not eating well, not having time for exercise. That can take a toll on you physically as well, in addition to maybe not having the time to have a healthy diet or get out and exercise. So there is really large literature internationally showing there is strong link between mental health and physical well-being, and this is moderated by your level of activity. So getting out there for a run, going to the gym, whatever your thing is. I also hear a lot of that after talks that I've done in this industry, where people share with me that they have their own struggles with mental health and they have their own solutions that they need to do, and a lot of them are physical based, some even more subtle physical based activities like meditation or yoga, but a lot of running and going to the gym. So has it been a personality type of trait? Some people like getting out there and going for a run, and that's all great, and that helps them. Other people just need to shut down, like get out of work, forget about it for a while, rather than run a marathon to feel a little bit better about themselves.
We've probably got time for one more, Marley, if there is one.
Sure, no worries. Yeah, there's a couple more. I'll choose one that was sitting here. Has there been any overlap with the new ISCA version 2 requirement for an employee culture and wellbeing program? You can
I'm going to admit that I don't know what ISCA is.
Marty, I'm happy to help with that if you want. So ISCA is the Infrastructure Sustainability Council of Australia, and we've been using their new version 2 scorecard, and that has requirements to put an employee culture and wellbeing program into the project. And a lot of the significant road agencies are signed up to, I suppose, getting ratings for their project, ISCA ratings. So there may be a bit of an overlap here. It also requires, for example, Luke, employee surveys to be carried out annually and to show improvement. And there's measurement of improvement. So I don't know, going back to what Quentin was saying, whether there's opportunity for Roads Australia and ISCA to kind of agree on what those surveys would measure.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I think at least making it a requirement and there's going to be some sort of assessment is only a positive step. I do think, like, as part of that grant that I mentioned, we're using the same surveys as we did in the initial survey, so we can directly refer back to that population at the time and see where everyone sat in relation to them. So really giving it an industry standard of mental health at different time points. So that'd be something I'd be interested in sort of collaborating in, and therefore being able to evaluate what's working, what's the best way to implement these things going forwards.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, because we do have a partnership with ISCA, and they are part of our sustainability chapter. So it looks like one more area that we could probably partner with them in. Is there one more quick one, Marley? Otherwise,
do we have time? Yeah, time for one more. Richard, I will read your question. Given the recent changes in work due to COVID-19, remote work, has this changed your thinking or assumptions in any major ways regarding to wellbeing and infrastructure?
Has it changed my thinking? I think it certainly changed my thinking. It sort of added an extra layer of concern in that there are extra challenges to be working at home, and I've experienced it myself, in that if you're working from home and the emails are rolling in and you're not heading out to site, for example, where I'd be heading to a lab to do something scientific, you're not sort of getting around, moving, doing things like that. You don't have your ideal setup for completing your work. So even so, like for today, I've come to my office because I didn't want my 3-year-old son to join us on this Zoom, and I wasn't sure that the bandwidth would be sufficient to be able to talk to you all. So it's sort of changed the way that we go about our jobs. I've also observed at the Moriarty bypass site a real change in the way that they go about all their jobs. So a startup meeting in the morning is now done via radio, which sounds pretty simple. Might sound as though like might not work because people can just not listen, like just click the mute, put it in your pocket and head off to do your job. But it's in positive news. That's actually been one of the more positive changes that the COVID-19 situation has made, in that people who are less willing to talk up in a group of their colleagues and that's standing around actually speak up over the radio. But as for improving well-being in infrastructure in this time, it's certainly going to be more challenging. So, but it hasn't really changed my thinking around the ways that we could alter job design, way projects are managed, improvements in leadership and communication, and how those things could help people's mental health.
Yeah, well said, Luke. And I think there are concerns that that we're probably not realising with COVID-19. And some state governments, bless their hearts, have decided to open up working hours to 7 days a week, including public holidays, allowing people to work nights. So some of our construction teams, because they're all essential workers, are now working 7 days a week, which is just adding additional pressures. I think it's been fantastic, Luke, and congratulations on the research work that you've done. We'd love to obviously keep you very close to Roads Australia, and perhaps get you along to our team's presentation later in the year in terms of their projects and their reports. Now, if you would like to take your phones off mute, maybe we can all give Luke a clap, and thank you very much. It's not quite the same as a big room, is it, Luke?
Sorry?
I said it's not quite the same as being in a big